am a lawyer, but I am not necessarily your lawyer. The materials discussed in this podcast are for informational purposes only and should not be deemed legal advice. If you have a specific legal question according to your circumstances, then I encourage you to speak with an attorney licensed in your jurisdiction. Welcome back to another edition of Ag Law Today. We've got a very special guest coming from Kansas. We've got Chelsea Good on the line. Hi, Chelsea. How are you? And
Hi,
welcome to the
Kimberly.
podcast.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
So Chelsea is an attorney who's there with the Livestock Marketing Association in Kansas. Chelsea, could you tell us a little bit about what LMA does in Kansas, and then more about your position specifically?
For sure. So Livestock Marketing Association is the national trade association that represents livestock marketing businesses all across the United States. Most of our members are going to be your typical livestock auction. Depending on where you live regionally, they get called sale barns or stockyards, but that fixed facility location where producers bring their cattle and they have a sale day and an auction, and we achieve true price discovery. That's the core of who our members are. We also have a lot of our members who have online and video sales as well as livestock dealers, people who are in the business of buying and reselling livestock. So as a trade association, LMA represents all of those folks. In my role, I am our Vice President of Government and Industry Affairs and Legal. So what I do is I spend most of my time on policy issues, going back and forth between Kansas City, our headquarters, and Washington, D.C., making sure that we work with Congress and the administration so that we can keep laws from passing that would negatively impact our members, and ideally work with our regulators and legislators to improve our business environment.
That's great. So Chelsea, I don't know if you know this, but many, many years ago, I interned on Capitol Hill. I actually, it was one of the propelling moments in my life that drew me to want to go to law school. And I was working for a Texas congressman at the time. He's still in office, Kevin Brady, with the Ways and Means Committee. And that experience was enlightening to me because congressmen get a lot of mail. They have a lot of people that want to meet and talk with them. And I think that the big thing that I took home was that your voice matters, right? You are part of what goes into maybe a report or statistics about the different constituencies. You know, what advice do you have to our listeners that maybe have positions, policy positions, and they want to help get their voice heard at either the state or the federal level?
Absolutely. I believe that all politics is local and all politics is relational. So the very first thing you do, whether you are a livestock producer, whatever your business is you start to build relationships. You just invite your members of Congress and their staff to come see your operation, or to meet for a cup of coffee and just kind of build that relationship. I find that we have the most success when we're working with offices that when they see me, I'm not just Chelsea Good, some lobbyist. I'm Chelsea Good, and Chelsea Good is connected to this sale barn owner who got involved in my campaign, or introduced themselves when I was new to in the community as their new representative. And so just building those relationships, in my mind, is really the foundation of being effective in policy.
And what have you found to be the power of being part of a trade association, whether or not it's LMA or one of the other commodity groups, that sort of have that collective power and voice in Washington, D.C. or at the state level? What are your thoughts on that?
I'm a big believer in the value of associations. We in agriculture can be so independent, but at the end of the day, we are a lot of small businesses and families that are working day in and day out to produce food. And that doesn't exactly lend itself to, I don't know, reading the Federal Register every morning to see if there are any proposed regulations that might have unintended impacts that would affect my business. And so that is why I think it's important to be involved in association so you can have professional staff like myself, where that's why I went to law school. That is what I wake up to do in the morning, is to make sure that their interests are heard in DC. And then so one of the benefits is just having the staff time and maybe skill set that's a little different than your skill set. The other benefit is just the coming together, that I think that there is a real value of a lot of bright people that maybe are facing a challenge together. I'd give COVID-19 as an example. It's been really, really challenging times in our industry. We are having some conversations about maybe some changes that would impact our industry going forward. I like the associations being kind of the table for people to come together and bring their ideas and hash them out. And that way, when we go to Congress or we have an ask, we're asking with one voice. And I think that that's another real big benefit as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So Chelsea, we're going to talk about this little thing called livestock sales and payment protection. I know that this kind of is rooted with the Packers and Stockyards Act. Can you tell me a little bit more about it?
Sure. So the Packers and Stockyards Act was passed in 1921, and it is one of the foundational laws in our industry that kind of dictates how people have protections when they're selling livestock. And it applies to our livestock packers, stockyards, so sale barns like my membership, as well as livestock dealers, and dictates some rules by which they have to play, and also gives producers doing business with those entities some assurances that they're going to get a fair price, they're going to get paid, and they're going to get paid for the value that they provided.
That's great. So can you talk to me a little bit more about how it all works, sort of like a step by step with the custodial trusts, starting at the producer level?
Certainly. So when you're a producer and you're selling livestock, I think that's the easiest way to think about this. A lot of producers sell livestock at their local livestock auction, right? And when you do so, there are a lot of benefits. There's the benefit of having an auctioneer and multiple people competing, so you've got that price discovery bringing the bids up. But another real big benefit, I believe, is that guarantee of a good check. Your livestock auction is bonded. They're licensed, they're registered by Packers and Stockyards, they're bonded. They also have what is called a custodial account, which means that they have a separate account that is just producers' funds, and your livestock auction is paying the producer whether or not the buyer pays the auction. So that
So
is.
let's back up there, just Chelsea. Let's just pause on that custodial account. So this is basically like a trust account, is that right?
It is. It's a physical trust account that livestock auctions are required to have for producers' funds.
Okay. And how is it determined how much money should be in that custodial trust account?
There are a lot of rules and regulations that dictate, yeah, very specifically, but the big picture is there has to be enough funds in the account that producers' checks will clear. And then after there is a sale, anytime that livestock auctions are paid for livestock, those funds have to go in that custodial, that trust account. They can't go into that general account. And then by 7 days after the sale, even if the auction hasn't received funds for livestock that were sold, they have to take their own funds from the general account and do what's called a balancing of their custodial account. So
Okay.
there are quite a few rules in place that make sure that that account balance stays high enough to guarantee that producers' checks are always going to be good from a livestock auction.
Got it. And we are talking about live livestock auctions, right? What about online auctions?
This is actually really interesting. I was part of a coalition in 2015 that did some updates, some modernizations to the Packers and Stockyards Act. It was a little unclear prior to 2015 how this applied to your online or your video auctions. We worked with Congress in the Packers and Stockyards division of USDA. It's now clarified your online and video auctions, if they are selling livestock on commission and handling producers' funds, they have to play by the exact same rules. They also must have a custodial account.
Oh, that's good to know because I think that for the longest time, I felt like it was very muddy and unclear on where online really fell with all of that. So that's good to know. So, so let's go through the next step here. So, what happens then at the custodial account is sort of the security there. What if there's a problem down the road and in the chain of custody there?
Unfortunately, that's something that we do see happen. So, for example, a producer sells to a livestock auction. The livestock auction pays the producer, but say they sell to a livestock dealer that's
Mhm.
somebody who's in the business of buying and reselling livestock. They're a major part of our industry and a major buyer at our auctions. If the livestock auction gets a bad check from a livestock dealer or no check, they essentially have to bear the brunt of that loss. Those livestock dealers are also regulated by Packers and Stockyards. They are required to have a bond, but typically your bond payment's about 5 to 15 cents on the dollar. It typically does not lead to good recovery. Honestly, this is an area of the law I think probably needs improved, and there is a active push to do so right now. The hardest call I get is when I get a call from someone who says, "Hey, I sold livestock to this dealer. Um, Check came back insufficient funds. They still have the livestock. I'm just going to go pick those livestock back up." And unfortunately, under our current laws, what I have to tell them is chances are you probably don't have first rights in those livestock. Even though the dealer never paid for them, they've got a lender who probably has a blanket lien in after acquired livestock, and that dealer's lender is going to be first in line, even in livestock that they have not yet paid for. I think that's a problem, and it's something we're working to adjust.
So when you said there's a push for change, are you talking about the Securing All Livestock, sorry, I can't talk right now. I'm going to repeat that. Securing All Livestock Equitably Act, that's currently pending in Congress. Is that what you're talking about there?
Absolutely. So the SALE Act has been introduced in Congress and both in the House and the Senate. And what the SALE Act would do is it would create a dealer statutory trust. And what this is it's actually modeling after something that already exists when you're selling to a livestock packer. In the late 70s, there were defaults by packers, and at that time, industry and Congress worked together to create a statutory trust. Now, this is different than the physical custodial account trust that a livestock auction has.
Mm.
What a statutory trust does is it's not a physical account, but rather it is a reprioritization of assets. It makes it so that the unpaid seller to a livestock dealer, whether that's a livestock auction or it could be a producer that sold to a dealer in the country, it would, if a dealer trust existed, the unpaid seller would have the first rights or ability to get the livestock back if the dealer still has the livestock, which they can't do under current law. That's kind of the first part of what would be a trust asset, is the livestock that have not been paid for. The
Mhm.
second part is, let's say the livestock dealer has already resold those animals. They're feeder cattle. The dealer purchased them, gave a check, but the check's going to come back insufficient funds. But in the meantime, the dealer has turned around and resold those livestock to a feed yard. In that situation, the feed yard would still have clear title, just like they do today. They're their livestock, but it's the funds that the feed yard paid the dealer, the proceeds or receivables from those livestock would also be statutory trust assets. So an unpaid seller would have first priority in the livestock or proceeds from livestock if a statutory trust existed.
So who exactly is a dealer under the statute? Is it essentially a middleman that's in the business of buying and selling livestock?
Exactly. It's someone who is in the business of buying and reselling livestock in
Mhm.
commerce.
So Chelsea, I'm wondering, is there a de minimis exception here under the statute? Just because I feel like it's so common right now in the livestock industry for people to buy and resell cattle. And, I'm getting phone calls when things go wrong. And I'm just curious if people that are doing that know that they are, that this law is applicable to them.
Really good question, Carrie. As it relates to the Packers and Stockyards Act, there is not a de minimis or threshold that you have to reach in order to be a livestock dealer. If you're in the business of buying and reselling livestock, you meet that Packers and Stockyards Act definition of a dealer. You are technically supposed to be registered, you're supposed to be bonded. I think you and I both know that there's a decent sized class of people out there that probably technically should be registered that are not, but as it relates to the act itself, there is no threshold. Now, thinking about the Sale Act and the creation of a dealer statutory trust, in order to provide a little bit more clarity there is a de minimis threshold that someone would have to do $100,000 worth of business a year of buying and reselling of livestock in order for the dealer statutory trust to apply if the Sale Act makes it through Congress.
So for those that are listening, they're like, oh crap, I should be registering. What is the process to become a registered dealer?
So reaching out to your regional Packers and Stockyards office is the answer to that. They've got three regions. Western region is officed out of Denver. There's an Atlanta office as the Eastern region, and then the Midwest region is out of Des Moines, Iowa. You reach out to Packers and Stockyards, you fill out some paperwork, and then really the biggest burden or other piece is getting a bond. So you work with a surety company. Actually, LMA has a insurance agency, livestock marketing insurance agency, and we actually are one of the entities that can help people get bonded to be a livestock dealer that is in compliance with their Packers and Stockyards requirements.
All right. So Chelsea, I always close with a couple questions here, one of which I know that you're not in private practice, but if people are looking for an agriculture lawyer to answer their questions, whether or not it has to do with the Packers and Stockyards Act or other agricultural questions, what would be your suggestion to our listeners on finding the right agriculture lawyer near them?
That's a really good question, and we do kind of keep a list of folks that have some area of expertise in Packers and Stockyards Act in particular. I'll mention from a DC perspective, John Dillard with OFW Law is somebody who has started to spend more and more time with Packers and Stockyards Act and some of those clientels. But often I really recommend that someone work with a local attorney or at least an attorney in their same jurisdiction. And so we do keep a list of folks that are kind of our referral list. Honestly, I think that the other really good resources, the American Ag Law Association, that seems to be a group of attorneys, including many private practitioners that have taken a particular interest in building their subject matter expertise in ag law in particular.
It was great to see you last fall at AALA. I'm wondering, Chelsea, do you think the conference is going to happen in live form, or do you think it's going to go
I hope
virtual?
so. I really hope so. It partially it's supposed to be Kansas City based this fall, and literally of like the conferences I go to, three of them this year were all going to be in Kansas City, and they're all national conferences that travel. And I was so excited to get to see people, but sleep in my own bed. Two of
Hmm.
the three were this spring and have been canceled. So selfishly, I hope that's the case. But I think we're living in kind of a little bit of an unknown world at this time, and I don't think
It
we know
is.
what new normal looks like for sure until we see a vaccine.
Yeah, I think you're right, Chelsea. So where can people find you on the internet? What's some contact information for you, Chelsea?
So lmaweb.com is going to be our LMA website. My personal email address is cgood@lmaweb.com. And then the best way to get a hold of me in terms of call number is 816-305-9540.
All right, excellent. Thank you for your time and thank you for coming to the podcast.
Thank you, Carrie.